Be Wealthy and Smart, episode 841.
Step into a world of wealth and financial freedom without budgets, boredom, or bosses on Be Wealthy and Smart. And now, here's your host, Linda P. Jones.
Welcome to Be Wealthy and Smart. I'm Linda P. Jones, America's Wealth Mentor, empowering women and men worldwide to financial freedom. On today's show, we're going to talk about why 9 million Americans moved in 2020. And this comes to us from CNBC.com and was written by Sean M. Carter. And it says, nearly 9 million Americans moved in 2020, and a lot of them settled in Idaho, according to new moving trends and relocation research. Moving contracts from Atlas Van Lines show that of the people who settled in a new state during the pandemic, many opted for a suburb or even an area with more space over a popular but expensive big city. The researchers analyzed 64,858 interstate and international moves to identify inbound versus outbound states. Inbound states are where, of the total number of people who moved statewide, more moved in rather than away. Outbound states are the opposite. A larger share of the total movers left the state. If homeowners had been putting off a move from a big city to the suburbs for more space or lower costs, says Warburg Realty real estate agent Stephen Gottlieb, living through a pandemic with everyone working and living on top of one another at home might have pushed them. Imagine living in a larger space with a backyard, home office, and room for the kids to run around, and it costs less, he says. It makes a ton of sense. And then it says Americans left New York and California and headed to Idaho, North Carolina, and Maine. Idaho claimed the top spot on Atlas's inbound list for the fourth time since 2016. Of all the moves to or from the state from January to December 2020, 66% were people moving in. People also moved to North Carolina, Maine, and New Hampshire in droves. Those states saw incomers at 64% to North Carolina, 62% to Maine, and 61% to New Hampshire. Alabama, New Mexico, and Alaska each pulled in new residents at a rate of about 60%. More people moved into than out of Kentucky for the first time in a decade. California, on the other hand, set a different record. A total of 57% of its moves were people leaving the state in 2020. Last year was the first time the Golden State was classified as an outbound state since 1995. Lots of people moved within states too, and even within metro areas. In New Jersey, more than 60% of the relocations last year were people leaving cities but staying nearby. Likewise in the Chicago area. City life no longer afforded the perks that some Americans were paying for, says Gottlieb. Paying the high living expenses typical of city life can be tougher to rationalize without restaurants, sporting events, concerts, or theater. Accepting more living expenses for a shorter commute had been a major draw for city life. With so many people working from home, the commute disappeared, and some homeowners felt they were paying for perks they no longer enjoy. And then it says, American suburbs have been surging. The overall moving trend has leaned toward suburbs, since they can be less dense and less expensive and offer larger homes. Houses with space are particularly useful in the COVID crisis, since at least 40% of the American workforce was fully remote in December. Over 70% of home buyers and sellers expect they'll be able to keep doing work from home. The National Association of Realtors collected March 2020 to October 2020 change of address data from the U.S. Postal Service. Williamson County in Texas, a suburb near Austin, had the largest inbound gains in the first 7 months of the pandemic. Almost 4,000 people moved in, then out to Austin. Suffolk County, New York, another suburb, also saw a fresh influx. In contrast, New York County, Manhattan, And Texas's Travis, Harris, and Dallas counties, where Austin, Houston, and Dallas are, lost over 25,000 movers combined. Housing seems to be the primary reason people moved during the pandemic, said Nadia Evangelou, the NAR's senior economist and director of forecasting. A number of the firm's realtors said that most buyers are looking for a bigger home or home features that could function as a space to use for remote work, like a basement or den. Many of the people who moved last year didn't go very far. More than half of those who fled New York settled in New Jersey, and 12% went to Connecticut. Most San Franciscans who relocated moved within 60 miles of their old address. Many people who might have moved to lower their expenses and gain square footage didn't necessarily want to move too far away from the familiar things like family and friends, says Gottlieb. There is a sense that pandemic life isn't permanent, and we will all once again return to our offices and schools. Thus, moving too far away might not make sense. Evangelou, however, sees a future where Americans are freer to move farther. We may see an increase of people relocating to areas further from their previous residence later this year. They may also seek for a longer-term change in their life and move out to areas even farther away. Meanwhile, teleworking will likely continue long after the pandemic, even if it's 2 or 3 days a week. The next section says, move for the right reasons and understand the costs. The 8.93 million Americans who moved at the beginning of the pandemic is an increase of about 94,000 people who relocated than during the same period in 2019. And there seems to be no slowing down. A third of adults polled in a recent Redfin survey said they would consider moving if they could work remotely indefinitely. The Atlas research supports that. The pattern in 2021 will be similar to what we saw in the past year, Barry Schellenberg, the president of Atlas, told CNN Business, explaining that similar migration patterns will continue into at least the first 6 months of the year. People will be moving away from the coastal areas where there is a higher cost of living and going to places like Idaho, Arizona, Texas, and Tennessee. If you're saving up for a home, take a measured approach, experts say. Determine how much you need for a down payment and stash away a bit of money at a time until you get there. While a bigger place in the suburbs can sound appealing, it's smart to consider the full picture. Find out if you can still work from home or if you need to land a new job when you move. And since different cities have different cultures, it makes sense to rent for a short time first to see if your lifestyle matches with your new city. Moving is expensive, whether or not there is a pandemic, Gottlieb says. There are friction costs with buying and selling real estate, and it's tough to put a price tag on the headache of packing up a home and then unpacking again. At any point, I advise people to make sure they are moving for the right reasons and that they fully understand all the costs. End of article. And I will post a link to this in the show notes so you can take a look at it. But I thought this was really interesting. Yes, people are moving for lots of different reasons, and they're moving to many different states. I've talked about Tennessee being one of the top states people are moving to as well. Depends on whether people want some land, whether they plan to do a little farming, or whether they're looking for a more suburban lifestyle and less of a city lifestyle. But overall, I really think the main thing you want to do is take a long-term perspective with your living circumstances. It's not a good idea to be buying a house for the short term. That's very, very expensive, and prices can fluctuate a lot in the short run. So always take a 10+ year perspective when you're buying a home. And remember, there's a massive inventory shortage right now, so there's multiple offers in many, many states, and it's a great time to sell, but difficult to be a buyer. So if you really need a house and you think you're going to be there for a long time, then it makes sense to move. But if you're doing something shorter term, or you're not sure what your plans are, or you want to go to a place for a while and check it out, I think the rental market is a good way to go for a year or two. That way you have maximum flexibility, and if for any reason you don't like it or circumstances change or you regret your move, you have the opportunity to make another change very, very quickly and at minimal cost. So just something to think about. If you haven't yet subscribed to Be Wealthy and Smart, hit the subscribe button and you'll be notified as soon as new podcasts are available so you never miss one of them. And if you're looking for a good financial book to read, check out You're Already a Wealth Heiress, Now Think and Act Like One, 6 Practical Steps to Make It a Reality Now. The Wealth Heiress book was named to the all-time best wealth books list by Book Authority, and men love my book too. It's got lots of tips on making your first or your next million, your millionaire action plan, specific tips and advice to follow that are going to get you to financial freedom faster. That's all for today. Until next time, live the good life and be wealthy and smart.
Thank you for listening to Be Wealthy and Smart with Linda P. Jones. Share the wealth and tell your family and friends about the show. Check out our website, blog, and social media for more riches at www.bewealthyandsmart.com.